Okay, so I know it's not 7 yet, but I am being fashionably early, and I'm just going to read you some useless information until it gets closer to 7. What time is it? 6:38? Okay. So let's talk about poison. Poisonous plants. Deadly nightshade, also known as belladonna. Every part of this perennial herb is poisonous, but the berries are especially dangerous. The poison attacks the nervous system instantly, causing a rapid pulse, hallucinations, convulsions, ataxia, and coma. Wolfsbane. This deadly plant was used as an arrow poison by the ancient Chinese, and its name comes from the Greek word meaning dart. Wolfsbane takes a while to work, but when it does, it causes extreme anxiety, chest pain, and death from respiratory arrest. And one person, can you let me know if you can even hear me? Please. Meadow saffron. This tough little plant can be boiled and dried, and it still retains all of its poisonous power. As little as 7 milligrams of this stuff could cause colic, paralysis, and heart failure. Hemlock. Oh, also, my dogs, they're not going to be here this time, but they will be scratching on the door. And after this is out, I will delete this whole part up until we talk to Mr. Brenner, because I always have problems working out this StreamYard stuff. So I just figured I will make sure it works. And I have everything ready. So please, 2 people, someone just please type, you can hear me. Because then I'm going to think you can't. Hemlock. This plant is probably the best known of the herbaceous poisons. It was used to knock off the Greek philosopher Socrates. Hemlock is poisonous down to the last leaf and will often send you into a coma before it finishes you for good. And this, I guess I can put this up here. I want it. There are 5 ways a person can be exposed to poison. Injection, which is actually possible, but it's actually ingestion. I just read it as injection, but injection would work too. But ingestion, inhalation, ocular, dermal, and from bites or stings. And let's see, this is getting boring. I wonder if this is useless information because it's not even interesting. What year is this? Oh, 2 random facts is I am related to 2 presidents. Obviously not Obama, because I'm going to regret saying that. Oh my gosh. Anyway, where was it? I saw the president thing in here. Where was it? Was the Harrisons. One, oh, he will, I don't know if he can see it yet. I'll see if he wants to come on or not yet, Asha. I'm just trying to, start it, get it on before 7. So I'll see. Hold on. Let me check. Hold on. Or actually, because I can see Mr. Brenner's thumbnail on the bottom. Do you want me to just turn it on? Or do you want me to wait till 7? Do a thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay.
Are we live? Hey.
Looking slick.
Me? I look like hell. I feel like hell.
I don't think my volume's working. Hold on.
I have volume.
I'm going to have to wear these awful headphones. Why isn't this working? Hold on, let me see. Speakers. Okay, try saying something.
Hello.
Dang it. Just a second. I need to get some like you. Until then, I have to wear these ugly ones. Okay, try saying something now.
Arrivederci, baby.
Oh, hi, I can hear you now.
Great.
Okay. Looks like I have ear muffs on. Okay, so I know it's not 7 yet. And can you see the chat on the side as well? Are you able to see that?
Yeah, there's a private chat there.
Okay, and also, are you able to see the, like, this? Okay, just making sure, because...
Oh, an anglerfish. Cute.
Cute! So, yeah. So,
hey, if you're a male anglerfish, you love that thing so much that you attach onto her body and stay there.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh. That's how male anglerfish find female anglerfish in the abyssal darkness.
Oh.
Yeah. They just grow into her body and, become a pair of testicles for her.
See, I don't need this book. I just need you to tell me stuff.
I do. I have a lot of useless information in my brain.
Well, how are you doing?
I'm struggling with... I got a little relief from my vertigo last week by the expedient of just popping my neck. It gave me about 4 days relief from it, but then it came back. but I think I now know where the cause of it is. It's in my neck. Yeah. And I'm dressed in this bathrobe tonight because I have a sore on my leg that shorts or pants rub against and irritate it. So I don't always dress like this, especially when I have company over.
Well, I'm not anybody, so
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to dress up anyway for me.
Okay. And you're not telling me that famous and important people aren't listening to this podcast?
I mean, you're on it and listening, so kind of both.
I'm not famous. I'm notorious. Just a second. Okay, in about 3 minutes, I'll have to get up briefly to take the tea bags out of the tea, but
Okay,
just take me a second.
that's fine.
So, we're talking about some unusual things tonight. You said you wanted me to talk about my experience with Wilhelm Reich's teachings and work.
And I keep calling him William, but it's Wilhelm.
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 Yeah, jawohl.
Wilhelm. I can't do it.
He was Austrian.
Okay, so I made this little thing. If I can figure out how I can put it on here.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. The basic beliefs of Wilhelm Reich.
We don't need me as the main person.
Okay. Energy was intended to be released through. Yeah, let me explain something about Reich, though.
Okay.
These are his fully formed beliefs. He spent years reaching them. Okay. And there's some kind of muddy family history in there too. There's a lot of things that point to the fact that Wilhelm Reich was almost destined to go nuts, and I believe he was. Let me just tell your audience something, okay? I was subjected to Wilhelm Reich's orgone therapy as a child.
Oops, sorry.
It was a terrifying experience for me. I was tormented by the orgonomist, who was not Reich. I was tortured by him physically, emotionally, and I was molested by him sexually. He did this to hundreds of other pediatric patients. His name was Dr. Albert Duval, and he was a very close associate of Reich's. Reich appointed him to be the leader or manager of the Orgonomic Infant Research Center. Orgonomic is one of those buzzwords that Reich came up with for his theories, having to do with orgone, orgonomic. Duval, in his position of trust, was sued by a mother whose 5-year-old son he taught to masturbate. Okay. Reich, at the end of his life, had some very weird beliefs about childhood sexuality. He thought children should be free to express it, but only with other children. Oh, God.
You go get him.
Okay. I think one of Reich's proudest boasts as a father was that he saw his 3-year-old son, Peter, who wrote a autobiography called Book of Dreams about Reich. He saw his son, Peter, having sex with a 5-year-old girl, and he thought that was wonderful.
Oh.
Now, I'm not going to criticize that, but the notion that you can free the world from neurosis by granting people the right to have orgasms is just bullshit.
And I read it can't just be like an orgasm. It has to be a full-blown, completely intense
Yes,
orgasm.
you have to lose consciousness for a second.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, as my sister said, sometimes you just want to fuck. She went through orgone therapy too. My whole family was in orgone therapy. See, this is the thing about Duval. He liked to get whole families. And then he could pick and choose the children that were appealing to him as molestation victims. And I think that what he did to the adults was actually a form of hypnosis, because I have spoken to several other children. We all tried to tell our parents about what was going on in Duval's soundproof locked office. They wouldn't listen. They didn't hear us. We told them.
They didn't want
said,
to believe
oh no, it couldn't be. He's a psychiatrist. He's a wonderful man. There's another something about the 50s that you have to understand. Everything was psychological. Just look at the Hitchcock movies, okay? They start being about psychological phenomena in the head. And, you know, I'm not just talking the murderer, I'm talking the good guy. Psychologists were almost revered. I mean, they were put on a pedestal. These people could do no wrong. You know, they were the new saviors for a new humanity that believed in science. Only a lot of people disagree with the idea of psychology as a hard science. It certainly can't compete with chemistry or physics.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a general attitude towards psychologists then. And Duval did not come to Reich de novo, out of nowhere. He had worked at I guess what you would call an asylum in Tennessee before this.
Okay.
And he had a long history of joining organizations. So if you look at his curriculum vitae or his resume, it looks great, you know? But a couple of these organizations are hypnotic organizations. And that's where I think the hypnosis comes into this picture. Now, back up a little bit. We're going to back up to my birth here in 1951, okay. May 9th, 1951. In fact, 10 a.m. in the morning, my mother is laboring on the labor table. And I'm coming out placenta previa, which is a very dangerous situation for both the mother and the child. The placenta comes out before the baby. It should come out afterwards, right? Mm-hmm. The afterbirth, that's what it's called. Okay. My placenta is coming out first. Supposedly Duval was there, and he, quote, saved my mother, saved both of us because of his knowledge about, you know, bad childbirth or something. I don't know. What was the obstetrician doing? Got me. I was there, but, you know, I can't tell you what went on.
And there's no more details like of exactly what he did or anything? I've
never heard them. Yeah. My mother never filled me in.
Okay.
I will tell you that my part of the problem also was that my mother's cervix contracted around my forehead as I was coming out. And my father said that I was blue from the middle of my forehead to the back of my head. Blue from the blood being cut off there by the power of the cervix muscles on my forehead. So a lot of what Duval did was very painful squeezing of my forehead, you know, to release the tensions, as he said, that I had gotten from this traumatic and difficult birth. I wonder if Duval could have done something to make the birth harder for my mother because he wanted me as his victim. I just don't know. I wouldn't put any evil past this man. Obviously, someone who molests hundreds of children is not Mr. Rogers. He is Joseph Mengele. And as far as I'm concerned, Duval was one of the most evil men of the world. he took something that was trying to be nice, Reich's children of the future concept which was that if you could raise a whole generation without neurosis. If they all got, the needed therapy, or their parents got the needed therapy. That was Reich's idea. Duval, I think, had rather the opposite idea, and Reich trusted him so much. He was even one of the guys who spoke at Reich's funeral. But to go back to my birth, very difficult birth. So I was in orgone therapy, I'm told, from 2 weeks old. And I stayed in it for about the first 7 or 8 years of my life. Now, my memories begin at around 5. That's where I can really trust my memory. And my memories about Duval being brutal and causing me a lot of physical pain are contiguous. In other words, I've never lost them. The memories are still there. The memories of his sexual molestation, however, didn't really start to occur to me until about 1985. I was still reading Reich's books then, and I was married to my first wife, and she had some experience as a psychologist. And she said, you display the profile of an abused child. And I thought about that. And I thought, who could have abused me? My mother was abusive, yes, but I don't think that explains it. The only person who really had that kind of access to me was Dr. Duval. As an orgonomist, I think probably the closest thing you can relate orgone therapy to, as I experienced it, is primal scream therapy, which is Jankov's version of Reich's work. I remember a lot of being of Duval poking me and prodding me and saying, you're tense here, you're tense there, loosen up, relax. Of course, it doesn't have the right effect. Causing people pain does not cause them to relax generally.
No, nor does fear.
No.
That just tenses
and
you
I
up.
feared this man was the terror of my childhood existence. It's like my parents took me to the boogeyman every week or 2 weeks. I don't remember. He had an office in New Jersey where we lived. And this just went on for years. Now, I didn't have contiguous memories of the sexual abuse. I began to suspect that something was wrong, though, in the 1980s. And in the 1990s, when I had a job with a newspaper out west, and I had medical insurance, I very carefully picked a psychiatrist who was skilled in PTSD, because I'd already been diagnosed as having that condition. Just from the childhood trauma I suffered from the little bullies in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. I mean, when you're in school, you have to put up with guys like that all the time.
Yeah, kids are jerks.
They're big jerks. I was a big jerk, but not like that. So things kind of coalesced one day. I was running a photo lab in Seattle in the mid-'80s. And I had a friend in the lab, and we were smoking a joint and talking. And he had worked up on the Trans-Alaska pipeline and made a lot of money that way. And I forget how the conversation drifted to Reich. But I was delighted that I didn't. He said he knew all about Reich. Some friend of his had had the therapy, or he'd had a little of it. And his opinion when I told him that I'd had therapy was, you put up with all that shit? And right then, at that moment, the edifice of Reich as the great man crumbled like so much sugar cubes with hot tea poured over them. It began to disintegrate from that moment and continued onward. I suddenly started seeing Reich didn't practice science. He was never a scientist. He was a pseudoscientist. He fit the profile perfectly, and I'll get into that in a minute. Okay. So I went to this psychiatrist. He was a Vietnam veteran, PhD. I'm sorry, he was a psychologist. He wasn't a psychiatrist because he couldn't prescribe.
Okay.
But he was a skilled psychologist. And he put me through hypnotic regression several times. Now, this is a controversial procedure. You undoubtedly remember, I don't know if you do remember all the shit that came up in the 70s with like, people having false memories of covens of witches doing bad things to them and satanic rituals in the parents' basement when the parents didn't have a basement and stuff like that.
I've heard of the false memories, but I didn't know it was a thing like in the 70s.
Yeah, false memory syndrome. Okay, I'm a case of actual recovered memories, and there is this too, because I confirmed all this later on with several other people who had been treated with my own family members, and by some explorations by my brother, who is himself an orgonomist. However, he is a very sensitive person who relates to his patients intently. He uses gentle and playful methods when dealing with children. He does not sexually molest anyone. And I know he is also very concerned about the welfare of his patients because several years ago, he flew down here unexpectedly and said, one of my patients just committed suicide and I've got to get away for a while. So, that happens to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Patients do that.
Did he have, do you know if he had any issues of being abused as well, like you did?
No, he received very little treatment from Dr. Duval, even though he had also had a difficult birth. The umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck, but Duval said he was okay. Now, Dr. Duval did treat my older sister, Sally, and I asked her what went on in there. And she said, well, he'd usually try to convince me that I was angry at Daddy, our father, Millard. And again, this is a common trick that child molesters use. They convince you that, your problem isn't really with them, it's with somebody else. He'd have me get really mad at Daddy, and then I'd kick and scream and pound on the bed, and I'd have a catharsis, and then he'd put me on his lap. Now, you're completely naked when you're on the couch with an orgonomist, okay?
I didn't know that part.
Completely naked. Nowadays, you can wear panties and a bra for women. But back then, that was so the orgonomist could see all your muscles. I guess the ones in the back don't count, but she said that Duval would have her sit on his lap while he told her comforting things and stroked her hair in the nude. This is not acceptable psychiatric practice. Duval died a natural death, which I think is very unfortunate. Because when I recovered the memories of him molesting me, I was so upset and angry. I would have bought a 45. And if I'd had a car that could make it from New Mexico to California, I would have gone to LA and blown his nuts off and watch him die slowly. Put the gun down, unload it, put my hands on my head and surrender to the cops. I'm sure I would have gotten psychiatric time because I think, and this is where this gets into my being a zoophile too. I attribute this about 50% to Duval's molestation of me, and about 50% to my mother's incredible neurosis. Now, let's go back even further, okay? Obviously, my parents were into this. I wasn't. My sister wasn't. My brother wasn't, okay? And by the way, you're seeing me without teeth tonight because I've had them all pulled because I'm going to get dentures.
That's fine.
Yeah, I didn't bite anybody, honest. My mother, Josephine Rhodes Brenner, a very tragic person. And sadly enough, one that I'm sad she was my mother. There were lots of other women out there that I think would have made much better mothers. Now, what happened to my mother? I never heard this from her. I heard it from my sister after my mother died. She died in 1999, just a few days after Stanley Kubrick, my favorite director. Anyway, when my mother was a little girl, the memory is that she came up with in therapy. She was raped by an older brother. He was in the Merchant Marine, came home from sea, and raped her when she was 2. Yeah. Even my dog's upset about that.
Yeah.
Hush! Hush!
He's mad. I don't blame him.
Her. Her childhood was it was just terrible. She grew up in Britain in the 1920s. She was born in 1916, I think, or 17. Of course, that was during, she was orphaned by the time she was 8. Her father died when she was 5. He was a well-to-do man. He ran a hotel in Hull, which is a city on the River Humber on the east coast of England. And he was also a salvage diver. He went down in those big bronze or brass hard hats that you see to salvage wrecks, and he got a percentage of the haul. So they were not poor, but when he died, and I'm not clear why he died, it threw the family into poverty. And 3 years later, my grandmother died of her 8th illegal abortion. Abortions were not permitted in England at that time, so to get one, you had to go to a back alley butcher, and it killed her. Just too many of them. You couldn't get birth control in England either.
Jeez.
Church of England. So her sisters, she was the youngest child, and her sisters were all older. They put her into a convent of nuns to be raised. She utterly hated it. They were cruel to her. They were stern. They were harsh. They indoctrinated her in Catholic dogma. She didn't believe any of it, but it didn't make her.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And she finally got out when she was 13 and took a job scrubbing floors to support herself in a rich person's house. She told me, though, of living next to a stable and having to steal carrots and molasses from the horses so she had something to eat. This was not the person I'd have chosen for my mother, okay? But you don't get a choice, unfortunately.
Doesn't sound like she did either.
No, her mother was an alcoholic. That's probably why. She spent a lot of time down at the racetrack, not raising the kids. She was raised basically by her sisters. And anyway, she made something of herself, as she put it. She entered the Royal Air Force. Oh, thank you. It's very nice. Can I just make a comment about that down to Asha?
Yeah. And then there's Lava Girl. She's listening while she's cleaning.
Okay. I'll wait till Lava Girl put something on the screen.
Oh, you know what?
What?
I think it got typed to my, I guess we can have a private chat. For some reason, I don't know what happened, but for my private chat, I am copying and pasting what you said to Asha. So,
Thank you.
Asha, this is what Mr. Brenner said.
By the way, are we going for an hour tonight or 2 hours? You never told me.
It doesn't matter. It's whatever you want to do.
Okay. I guess we're talking until I run out of subject.
Okay.
You can see a lot of the militarism too in her walk. I have home movies of her, like, walking, and she's stiff. She's real. She held herself so tight. Anyway, as a result of her early sexual molestation, my mother was anorgasmic. She was not able to have an orgasm. So, of course, she would be attracted to a cult that was all about orgasm, that said orgasms were central to life and health, and you should have a lot of very intense ones, and we're here to help you. My father spent thousands of dollars of his hard-earned money. He was a radar engineer and very well paid. He could support us on his salary alone in the 1950s and 60s. Built a house for us in Pennsylvania with a pool. Would never get a color TV, though. He always said the ones they were coming out with next year were going to be so much better. Wait till next year. Yeah.
Nowadays, that's for sure true.
Yeah. Well, computers, every 18 months, your chip capacity doubles.
Yeah.
But I think he spent thousands and thousands of his dollars on orgone therapy for our family, which was not needed. It certainly didn't help my mother become a better person.
So was he already practicing it, or did your mother bring him into it? Like, how did that work? Were they just both into it?
Well, my mother was originally interested in A.S. Neal, who was a British educator who had some radical ideas about education for young people and high school students. Basically a school that was less structured than the ones you and I attended. A school where students kind of, learned what they needed to know to satisfy their desire for knowledge. And Neal was a close friend of Reich's, and from there she got into the Reichian stuff. And I think she brought my father in. Yeah, my father didn't have any knowledge of this beforehand. He was very much a hard science guy. I believe I've told you before about when my grandmother died. She had done spirit writing all her life. And when she died, he burned all of her manuscripts. And my mother said, "You can't do that, Mill. Those belong to the children." And he said, Joe, in the future, nobody's going to be interested in this kind of horse crap. So we lost all her writings for what it was worth. Now my sister is into Gurdjieff, who was the mystic that my grandmother was into. So, what goes around comes around. My father, though, did have a vulnerability also. And you can see it in his eyes in the official company portrait of him for the firm he worked for, General Electronics. His mother, my paternal grandmother, Elsa, would give him enemas when he was a little boy. And I'm not going to try to compare it to a rape, but it's basically an anal rape,
Now, was there any medical issues requiring it at all?
No. It was the custom of the times.
Okay.
Like giving kids castor oil. Mm-hmm. She used to do that to them too, A clean intestines is a happy intestines, they thought. Turns out intestines have a lot to do with regulating what goes on in your brain. There are neurons in your intestines, you know? Anyway, that was the setup that I came into. What did Duval do to me? I recalled on the last day of this regression therapy, I had been through all the physical pain that I remembered. And that was contiguous, as I said. I had never forgotten that. But on the last day, my therapist agreed to try regressing me one more time. And I went back to Duval fellating me. Now, this is really horrible. He had yellow nicotine-stained teeth. And he smelled of cigarettes. He almost chain smoked constantly, except it was when it was in therapy with somebody. And I begged the psychologist to distance me a little bit from these memories, put them on a TV screen or a movie screen, you know, don't leave me in the middle of them. He didn't do that. I had to experience them firsthand. And as I said, I came out with enough anger to want to kill Duval. Also, before that time, I had some suspicions of a problem with my bowels. So you could either get a barium enema or a colonoscopy. The barium enema was less expensive, so because I was partly paying for this out of my own money, I went for it. The barium enema involves putting a tube in your rectum and putting some barium in there, which gives them contrast for an X-ray, and they can see everything inside the intestines. It hurt so bad that I had to ask one of the nurses attending me for a washcloth, stuff that in my mouth, and bite down as hard as I could on it. That was how intense the pain was that I was experiencing in my anus from this little plastic thing in there. And
how old were you again?
Oh, I was an adult by this time.
Adult by this time? Okay.
Yeah, I was selling cars for a living. God save them. But I asked one of the technicians afterwards if that was typical pain for this procedure, and he said, no, not at all.
No.
So there was something, you know, clenched against the invasion back there, and by that means I also determined that Duval probably sodomized me. Now, this may have been in the interests of orgonomy, because one of the things, one of the weapons an orgonomist had in the fight against neuroses was a thing called the shooter, which is connected to an orgone box. It's a piece of flexible metal hose or tubing. You've seen BX cable. It flexes, you know, it's made up of all little jointed metal bits. It's hollow. So they wrap cloth tape around this, and then they put a funnel at the end, a metal funnel, and this is supposed to direct orgone into you. Now they can add a glass test tube filled with steel wool to this, which directs the orgone into a body cavity, supposedly. And Duval may have fingered me anally, he may have stuck the shooter in me, or he may have stuck his penis in me. It doesn't really matter. I wasn't looking. I was face down on the couch, and it hurt like hell. And you don't realize as a kid that you're losing trust in someone, in some segment of society, but you are. Duval was just gross mistreatment. And I was so relieved when one day when I was about 7 or 8, my parents told me, you're not going to see Dr. Duval this week. He's split town. He moved out to the West Coast for some reason. We don't know why. He never said anything to us. He just up and moved. He never told any of his patients here that he was just going to move. Well, out in LA, Duval was just one of a million, weird practitioners. Sean Connery was one of his patients. Paul Newman and Joanne Taylor, his wife, were patients. There's a picture of Duval showing off his cloud buster, which was a Reichian invention for weather control.
I'll see if I can find a picture of him, and I can.
Yeah, thanks. I do have some. I was thinking about sending you some before the broadcast, but I didn't get around.
Yeah, I'll look real quick.
Mm-hmm. Albert Duval. Anyway, let's dwell on Reich a little bit, and let me tell your listeners exactly what he was into here.
Yeah.
Okay. Reich was a son of an Austrian farm couple. They had a nice farm, from what we hear. He wrote a book about his youth, which I haven't read. I gave up reading all of Reich's work after I discovered this. It's just so much shit to me now, All the nice words in the world, all the radical theories in the world, all the orgone energy in the world don't amount to a hill of beans. If the people who you say are trained to practice your medication, your system of medicine, don't treat people right. It's hollow, it's phony, it's false. Okay. Reich, Wilhelm. When he was 14, he caught his mother in flagrante delicto. I think that's the term. She was cheating on his dad.
Okay.
And he told his dad about it. His mom committed suicide. I think this was a terrible burden on the young Reich, but so, he never mentioned it. He goes along. He's in the First World War as a medic, combat medic on the battlefield. Gets some kind of an award. And became very interested with psychoanalysis, which was just kicking over in Berlin at that point. I'm sorry, in Vienna, Austria, where, of course, he lived. So he became a student of Sigmund Freud's, like many of the other famous psychologists of the 20th century. Oh God, what's the guy's name? Adler, the guy with the what was the Jung? Yeah, Adler, Jung. In fact, Adler, Jung, and Reich are known as the Holy Trinity, although I think Reich doesn't belong there. Excuse me a second.
Okay.
Okay, there. Anyway, Reich was very liberal and social-minded in his early years. He did things like he gave mass lectures in college auditoriums about human sexuality and birth control. There was under the interwar years in Germany before Hitler rose to power, there was a very radical and powerful leftist culture there that was into a lot of what they thought was modern thinking at the time. And Reich fit in groovy. Now, at this time, as he was in going for his, doctoral degree in college, Reich began some interesting experiments about human sexuality. For instance, he measured how the galvanic resistance of the skin decreased when you were in a state of sexual arousal. And, that kind of stuff is, yes, it's good science. It's interesting. You can possibly get that published in a journal because it's a limited experiment. It's got reputable results, hopefully. Okay. Sometime in the late 20s, Reich was looking through a microscope one day And he discovered these little things he called bions. I think he was looking at some sand that he had sterilized in a pressure cooker or an autoclave. And he saw something that shouldn't be there. He saw living, moving things in the sand, which had been subjected to high heat and pressure. He dubbed these things bions, B-I-O-N-S, and said they were the precursors of life.
Okay.
Now, did he have any reason for doing this? Did he do any scientific tests? Well, he says he did. But the problem with Reich's tests is that other scientists couldn't replicate them. And when they couldn't replicate them, most scientists would say, well, where did I go wrong? There must have been some flaw in my experiment.
So they thought they messed up, then he
Right.
couldn't possibly have.
Right. Reich didn't mess up. The people who were attacking him, or criticizing his results, reasonably from a scientific viewpoint, were his enemies. This guy, in his own right, was as narcissistic as number 45 that we just got out of office. Reich was convinced, and became more convinced as he went along, that he was right about everything. Everything. And you see, he didn't just stay with medicine. He didn't stay with psychology. He got into biology, biophysics. The blue aura that he saw around these bions was a new type of energy that he dubbed orgone. Now, if you go back and you read the papers from the 1920s to the 30s, as well as look at films like The Invisible Ray with Boris Karloff, every week somebody, some doctor somewhere, some crackpot is announcing the discovery of a new form of energy. Energy Z, energy Y, And this goes on, for years. None of these ever pans out. Reich's never panned out. But he insisted it did. And his criticisms of the critics evolved into the emotional plague. The emotional plague is an emotional disease that affects all of mankind, all our contemporary culture. And it causes people to be repressed, to repress their emotions, so their emotions turn toxic. It causes them to, hate the free and open expression of love or sexuality, and all sorts of bad things. Just imagine. Whatever you want to imagine about the emotional plague is probably true. Now, is the world a shitty place? Yeah. It's a shitty place. People do horrible things. Okay? But not because of the emotional plague. It was a fantasy that Reich dreamed up. It was an excuse to himself. Reich continued on this path. Now, he was also a Jew, so he wouldn't have been popular in Nazi Germany anyway, but his statements against the Hitler regime made him even less popular. So he caught the last boat out of Germany to Norway. And when Norway was invaded by the Germans, he caught the last boat to America. This is where he set up a laboratory in Rangeley, Maine, and went totally bonkers, nuts. Crazy. Reich began a series of experiments to see, this was the 1950s by now, the early 1950s. Okay. He's established himself as a great psychotherapist in America, by his own admission, and has got a coterie of followers. He publishes a regular journal. Now, mind you, Reich's never gotten any of his work published in independent scientific journals. I can't find any. Maybe my brother, if he was here tonight, could correct me on that. But that's, he's at band practice. He's got his priorities.
He was supposed to be a guest tonight.
Yes.
That was a special guest, was his brother, but he had band.
Well, my brother also wrote the introduction to my book about this, which is Growing Up in the Orgone Box, Secrets of a Reichian Childhood. And that's available either the ebook from Smashwords or on Amazon as a trade paperback, by the way. It's on sale now, too. I think I've got it at half off. So,
yeah, remind me when this is done, and I'll put the link on this when I,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Reich, in those days, our government was so naive and innocent that you could get the Bureau of Atomic Energy to send you free a little radium needle, radioactive. Yeah, for scientific experiments and general fun. They would do that. Because, not much was known about radiation. The Navajos and the Hispanics out in New Mexico were being given work digging uranium yellow cake out of the ground, and they were subjected to radon gas and all sorts of other things. Big uncontrolled experiment went on out there, by the way, with those poor miners. And when I left the reservation, they were having a hard time getting their compensation for suffering. Anyway, Reich decided to see if putting this radium needle in an orgone accumulator would somehow make it less radioactive.
Okay.
The opposite happened. Reich's whole lab was filled with what he came to call DOR, deadly orgone. Okay. Again, this is just another one of the, not contractions, but what are those terms called? When you reduce something to several letters.
Abbreviation? No, it's not abbreviation. I know. Someone think of the word. One of you people on the
All right.
thing. We know what you mean.
He had a whole bunch of words, of code words like that. He had virtually his own, language of symbols. The whole lab became filled with DOR, which manifested in everybody in the lab feeling sick, and the blackening of some rocks. We had a rock wall that was blackened by the DOR emanations. At the same time, Reich was also playing with a device called the Cloud Buster. Now, Kate Bush made a little film about this to a song with Donald Sutherland playing Reich, I think. First of all, Reich was about 2.5 of Donald Sutherland. Secondly, the Cloud Buster in the film is all juiced up with all kinds of fancy things on it. Regular Cloud Buster is just a bunch of tubes, hollow metal tubes, in a gimbaled axis, so you can swing the tubes and rotate it. And the tubes are connected by more of this hollow, flexible BX cable to a body of water. Ah, yes, there you go. You can see the tubes and the hollow metal BX cable there. Yeah, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
These things are utterly crackpot inventions. The idea being that the tubes somehow draw the orgone in to the water. Because orgone, as everybody knows, is attracted to water. Orgone also is blue in color, and it moves in spirals, which explains everything from the spirals of DNA. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there we go. He had 2 wives, I think, or maybe 3, I forget.
Yeah, I know he left his, I guess when he got into like doing all the sexual clinics and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his first wife.
Yeah, he left them, and when he went to America, he got a second wife and then had a son.
Mm-hmm.
That's.
Well, what should happen? But one evening, Reich sees a strange blue star in the sky and decides that this must be the UFO people watching him. Okay. God knows where this comes from. There's nothing. Reich declares himself the only person in the whole world who has ever thought about the possibility of alien life. Now, this ignores, about 40 years of science fiction where the subject had been thoroughly worked over many times by many different authors. Reich didn't read such trash. He was a scientist. Science fiction magazines had girls in, bra and panties type spacesuits on the covers with their midriff exposed to the vacuum. Doesn't work, but.
Acronym.
Dolly's name. Well, thank you. That is very sweet.
I still don't know why. It's whatever you type is going to my private chat versus the.
What I type is going to your private chat?
Yeah, instead of going to the group.
Oh, I see now why I've got it on.
Because I'll copy and paste what you just, that's what you just did.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think you just keep messaging me to the private.
No, I had it on private chat. I didn't realize. I thought there was a.
Okay.
Anyway, I can see now.
Yeah, so
Are you drinking water? I guess that's a question to you.
It is because
yes.
That's me.
Yeah, anyway. Oh, flying saucers. Well, America in 1950s was more crazy about flying saucers than we are now. They were being seen over Washington, with radar visual sightings confirmed and dismissed by the Air Force as unusual weather patterns, something like that. But Reich had to go and get involved with him. He had heard that there was a bad drought out west. So he put one of these cloudbusters on a carriage and took along an orgone energy motor that he had invented, which supposedly ran more efficiently because it used orgone energy or something. He gave this to one of his good friends and said, "Give this to the Air Force. They're the only people that really appreciate me." How did Reich know the Air Force appreciated him?
How?
Well, when he was doing his cloud busting experiments, 2 jets would fly by and they'd draw an X in the sky with their contrails. And he knew that there was an invisible UFO at the center of that X. And that's where he should point the cloudbuster. The Air Force was sending him coded secret messages.
So he really was losing it.
Fuck yes! He'd been losing it for 20 years. And, it wasn't his problem. The world rejected him because the world was a plaguey place, And even today, you'll find people who were fans of Reich. Oh, he's a plaguey person, It means they're uptight, rude, inconsiderate, whatever you want it to mean. Reich, okay, the guy with the motor, Reich's trusted assistant, I forget his name, goes to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and says, "My master sent me sends this motor to you for the Air Force to use. It's wonderful. It's more efficient because it uses orgone energy." The Air Force says, "What?" It says, "Orgone energy, the great discovery of Wilhelm Reich." The Air Force says, "Demonstrate it." So the guy demonstrates it. The Air Force is not impressed. "Don't call us. We'll call you." The orgone motor disappears from history. But Reich continues out to the desert in Arizona, where he sets up his cloudbuster. and proceeds after a terrible 6-month drought to make it rain in the desert. Yes, he really does.
I think
It rains. Yeah.
I think this quote right here. Well, this is in
Mhm.
Maine, but
Yeah.
that drought.
Rain began to fall shortly after 10 o'clock Monday.
So I'm sure he did it in several places.
Yeah. He eventually Reich ran afoul of the well, there were several bad articles about him. There was an article in the Saturday Evening Post, which was a glossy magazine at the time, by a woman who was, I think, rightly very critical of his weird sexuality theories. She didn't even know what was going on, in Duval's office. This was just the stuff that Reich was publishing and talking about that was getting people upset. You have to remember this. The 50s were also an incredibly sexually repressed time. I mean, when the Ed Sullivan Show would only show Elvis Presley dancing from the waist up.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, Reich runs afoul of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, because while he's gone, one of his assistants ships an orgone accumulator across state lines. Now, the FDA had gotten an injunction against him doing this. The guy did it anyway. We don't know whether it was to make a point or just a simple mistake. But the FDA came down on Reich like a ton of bricks. They literally raided his laboratory. They grabbed everything having to do with the orgone accumulator box. And you can also probably find a picture of these boxes if you went to they look like a phone booth. They're made out of Celotex, which is a wood particle material on the outside, yes, and galvanized sheet steel on the inside. Yeah, and the accumulator does just what it does. All it is, I can find out, all it is a weak electrical capacitor. So you're getting a slight charge, electrical charge, not orgone charge, when you're inside. But he never proved that these do anything. He even wrote to Einstein about these results of the orgone box, and Einstein considered the matter and wrote him back a very temperate letter, suggesting that there was just a thermal effect to account for the difference that Reich was seeing, and Reich said that his work had been misinterpreted by a representative of his who later turned out to be a communist. So anyway, the Reich-Einstein affair is famous among Reichians, and nobody else outside of them knows anything about it. He never denounced Einstein. It was always some other guy that had worked with him. Anyway, the FDA took all his stuff, all his writings, all his orgone energy boxes, any books or anything that related to the orgone boxes. Also, orgone blankets that Reich had made, which were flexible blankets that you could wrap around an arm. They do have a very amazing effect on burns, but I think that's just an electrostatic effect. I don't think it's anything having. There is no orgone, I mean, people have been looking ever since about 1500 for a life energy. They haven't found it yet. Life works on the energies of the universe. Chemical energy, kinetic energy, electrical energy, solar energy. Life doesn't need anything else. There's nothing special, nothing unique about life that sets it apart from the non-living world. There is and never has been any orgone energy. But you can't convince his believers of that, including my brother. Now, my brother will acknowledge that, the recent tests that have been performed don't look very good. But the FDA ended up burning 6 tons of Reich's books, papers, orgone accumulators. Yeah. Yeah, he was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. But you see, this is the only book burning that I know of that the American government ever carried out officially. And it's weird. I don't think anything justifies burning somebody's books because that's a technique right out of Nazi Germany.
Yeah, not right.
So
Yeah.
he dies in prison. His followers say he's murdered, because his orgone motor posed such a challenge to the auto industry and the oil giants. And, orgone industry and energy could, who knows what we could do with it? I mean, he started out saying this was a biological energy and ended up saying it was responsible for everything. Light, gravity, and new physics had to be worked out that would explain all this in ergonomic terms. The spiral shape of galaxies is due to orgone energy spiraling into the middle. On. Reich seemed, there are so many books authored by him. I don't know how it was possible for him to do all the work that he did and still write. He wrote every day. I think he had another disease called glossophilia, where you just write stuff that it doesn't make any sense. If you try to read his books, even scientific ones, they are a weird jumble of pseudoscience and some apt observations on the human situation.
Well, I've noticed online people take it very seriously because from what I've researched, there are so many sites that are still pro, orgone theory, and they're just obsessed with it still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, and now we have the latest development, orgonite, which is this man-made mineral that gives off orgone energy. It's a few little flakes of aluminum or something suspended in a clear matrix, like lucite or something. And the shysters that are selling these things charge you hundreds of dollars for them. Reich would have picked up a stick and beat them over the head, I think, if he saw this happening. He really wasn't interested in making money. He really wasn't. I'm sure he made a lot off of people because, psychotherapy is always expensive. It was expensive back in those days, even at $40 an hour. But he died, and the funny thing is, in my book, I don't remember a single damn thing about when he died in my family. I vaguely remember my father saying, "Oh, damn, Reich died." And that was about it, There wasn't a lot of grief and mourning, no sackcloth and ashes, no rending of garments. Both my parents continued to believe in him, although I think they're, as Reich's work was not validated by other realms of science, I think they lost interest over the years. So that is the sad story of my encounter with Wilhelm Reich. Now, I won't have anything to do with anything Reichian now. I think I wasted far too much of my time as a young man being hornswoggled with this stuff. And I can't see any good to it. I don't think the orgone therapy that I had was basically I didn't have Duval for all the therapy. Later on, I had a second therapist when I was living in Pennsylvania. His name was Dr. Herskovitz. He was very kind. He was compassionate. But even so, there was still an aura of a lot of mumbo jumbo about orgone therapy, like having me breathe a certain way and doing that for 5 minutes. Well, you go into hyperoxygenation. You've blown off too much carbon dioxide. Your system isn't telling you to breathe because there's no buildup of carbon dioxide. You get this tingling in your fingers and toes. And I spastic little movements and things. And he said, "Don't be afraid. That's just what happens. It'll go away in a few minutes." I remember leaving his place feeling warm, relaxed, and cozy. And then I had to go home to my mother, who was a piece of work. I've already explained that she was anorgasmic. She was hysterical most of her life. My two siblings and I all agree on the fact that she probably would have made a great bull-dyke lesbian.
Yeah, I remember from our last conversation that we had, she like never presented herself as a woman. Like she's just never dressed nice, never did makeup, never did her hair. I mean, just did not do anything like that at all.
Well, she did, but so infrequently that it was always startling to me when she did. Okay. I mean, she looked like a different person. Sometimes my parents would throw a party, and have some people over, and she'd dress up for that. But no, she was not a really feminine person.
Yeah, that's what it was. That's what you
and
said.
She certainly wasn't a font of love or reassurance for me. She was harsh. She nearly killed me one time, having me balance a stool on a bunch of bricks on steps so that I could paint the ceiling of the stairway that led up to my sister's room. I was 10 at this time, okay? And I was only on the chair for about 30 seconds before I tumbled down the stairwell in a pile of bricks and splashing paint. And somehow my ass landed in the paint pan and I tobogganed down the stairs on that.
That's like a cartoon.
None of the bricks hit me. I was astonished to find myself at the bottom of the stairs, a live hole surrounded by bricks and, paint. My mother came out of her bedroom, which she'd been painting, and said, "What's the matter? Did you do something wrong?" She had a Yorkshire accent, and she sounded like a Monty Python character when she was angry. She really did. No acknowledgement that she'd done anything wrong. No acknowledgement that she'd put me in any grave danger. No apology. She just said, "Oh, clean it up, and then you can go out and play. I'll have your dad do it when he comes home." That was the kind of treatment I got from my mother. And between Dr. Duval and my mother, I think I'm pretty soured on human beings as sexual partners.
Yeah.
And that's why animals started looking pretty good. Animals are soft, they're warm, they're cuddly. Dogs, if you have a dog, they're friendly to you.
You've had a very bad experience with people from day one.
Yeah, I have. Oh, I see it's almost 9 o'clock. Let's drop Reich back in the hole where he belongs, put the cover on tight, and move on to something else, okay?
Okay. I'm not going to find a picture of, I'm not going to put a picture of Duval on here. I don't want you to see a picture of him.
It won't matter to me. You can show all the damn pictures of him you want. There's just one or two on the internet anyway.
I know. I've been sitting here looking and I'm like, there's hardly anything.
He's not a well-known figure.
Yeah. You don't hear any mentions of him.
No, and of course, Reich got after a female practitioner. Sachs was her name, Felicia Sachs, who was supposedly doing some dodgy things with her patients. But he never bothered Duval in the slightest. Duval, I don't think he ever knew that Duval was doing this stuff. He wouldn't approve of it if he had. But Duval was getting away with murder right under Reich's nose and in Reich's name. Yeah.
That's a shame.
You want to know what it takes to produce a zoophile? I think it takes really intense sexual trauma.
And
yeah. a general loss of faith in humanity at a very early age, because this isn't something, they used to say, gays, they pull other kids into being homosexuals. You can't do that. You can't switch your sexuality on and off like that. Just try being a different sexuality for a day. If you're straight, try being gay. If you're gay, try being straight. It doesn't work. I taught myself to respond to women. And that's how I fathered a daughter. Women make wonderful sex partners. They make great lovers, wives, playmates, not the Playboy kind. But it took me a long while to appreciate that. It took me a long while.
I understand.
Yeah. Okay. Oh. On to the other great topic for tonight. Let's take a little break for a second, okay? I see we've got 1 or 2 minutes here before 9 o'clock. Let's just take a break.
Okay. Okay. Hello, Lucifer. I'm trying to crack your code, but I can't. And hello, Bruno. And hello, Mauricio, way up there. And hello, everybody, that I'm really bad at typing back, because I think it looks like I'm being disrespectful if I'm typing while I'm trying to look like I'm listening. So thank you, everybody, for saying hello. And Malcolm, whenever you're done with your break, just give me a thumbs up and I'll put you back on. So I'll show you some of the stuff on Reich. It's going to go on something different. Let's see. So that's Reich. He had a great hairstyle. He looks like all the people like on, like ancient aliens. They always have to have a crazy hairstyle. I don't know why that is. Let's see. There he had discovered his mother having an affair and told his father, and then she committed suicide. But I have this little slideshow that I can put on YouTube later if you want to look at it or anything like that. I know I'm going too fast to read it, but I'm just... If you are interested in that, I will put put it on to watch. And mainly I just put it on right now so I can have a break from my face being shown on camera because I get embarrassed. So, yeah. Are you still doing okay, Malcolm? Okay. You ready to come back on? Oh, okay. So I do that when you're ready. Do that when you're ready. With both. So I know for sure. Okay. Okay.
Great.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure you were for sure ready.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The other thing that you said you wanted to talk to me about tonight was my participation in the religion of Wicca, which I was enjoined to for 20 years.
Yeah.
How I got into it, how I got out of it. Well, I didn't know anything about witchcraft as a kid. You know, kids at Halloween would say, "Oh, don't go down to that house. They're witches. They'll get you." But you went down there, and they turned out to be a nice old couple, you know. They were giving you punch and candy apples and stuff. So, okay, you know, they were wrong. TV shows. Not many TV shows in the 1950s and 60s mentioned witchcraft. One of them, I remember, was some kind of a detective show where they had the suspect, and he described the ritual as the mad mother began dancing or something like that. And that is from Kali worship, which is a Hindu form of witchcraft.
Really?
Kali is very highly revered. She is not considered evil in Hindu culture. Kali is the goddess who has her foot on a demon's neck. In fact, she's doing the Eric Chauvin thing with a demon, and she's got a necklace of skulls and everything. So, but I presume that was just something the writers of that TV show dredged up out of some textbook or something. Nobody had any acquaintance in America with witchcraft in the 1950s. I became a witch because of the woman who would become my first wife. I'm not going to tell you her name, but her magical name. This is okay for me to do because she doesn't use this magical name anymore. I don't even know if she's into magic anymore. I haven't seen her for like 10, 11 years. Seafoam. She was a short Seafoam. She was a short blonde woman, very attractive. I mean, when I met her, she had a Playboy figure. She really did. And very short, very cute. And I met her because I had gone from Florida to Washington State to make a documentary film about killer whales with an old friend of mine from college. Well, the old friend turned out to be a major bozo. He completely screwed up the trip and screwed up the film for everybody. And I ended up basically stranded in Seattle. So I took up residence with this guy who brought me home, you know, so I could do handyman work for him. He was a chemist, about my age, a little older. I was in my late 20s. This guy was not particularly picky about the women he dated. He would date anything, you know, with 2 legs and an X chromosome, including, I think, chickens, but I never saw him with one. So, no, don't ever try to have sex with a chicken. You'll kill the chicken. You break a bone in it. Anyway, my friend brought home a number of really strange women. And my first wife was among them. She and I discovered that she liked talking to me more than she liked talking to him. And eventually we said, what are we doing in this place anyway? Let's move out and live together. So we did. We moved into our own house. We started having sex and started a relationship. And one day her mother came to take her on a herb hunting expedition out in the woods.
Okay.
And I sat there all alone. And I thought, something is really missing from this situation. Could it be that woman? I ought to marry her. So I did. And she was the mother of my daughter. Very difficult pregnancy because she had hyperemesis gravida, which means you throw up a tablespoon of water. And in fact, we went through that twice. The first time, the doctors didn't have any choice. They said, look, if you give birth, your chances are, okay, we can give you a anti-nausea drug, a very strong anti-nausea drug. That's the only thing we know that will cure us. But the chances are very good that you will have a deformed fetus. or we can put you in the hospital on 24-hour care until you deliver, 6 months from now. Needless to say, my wife took the drug and had an abortion. The second time, several years later, when she got pregnant, now that was an interesting circumstance, you see. This gets back to Wicca. My daughter is here. I am convinced. Well, not quite, but almost, because of a magical ritual we did.
Really?
Yes. My wife, Seafoam, oh hell, her name was Leslie. Leslie and I were going through some hard times. And we said, let's do a ritual for some more money. So we set up a magical ritual for the specific purpose, using the right colored candles and the right oils and the right symbols and things. And Leslie had a couple of problems, and one of them was that she was slightly dyslexic. Okay. So her job as the high priestess was to invoke the gods. And she said, we are doing this ritual to give ourselves posterity. I said, Leslie, you meant prosperity. She said, oh, did I make a mistake? 9 months later, of course, it didn't help that we closed the ritual by making love, but well, 9 months later, Taya was delivered. She wasn't born. She was delivered by C-section, but that's how she got here. So, when I believed in magic, I did believe in things like that.
Okay, so I go ghost hunting sometimes, and one of them is supposed to, I don't know, does Wicca and picks up and stuff like that and senses things. And
one of your fellow ghost hunters, you mean, or the ghost?
No, one of my fellow ghost hunters.
Okay, yeah.
And I guess spells like Wiccan spells, if they do them a little bit wrong, supposedly it can have horrible consequences on the actual intention of the spell. It might be completely different, and I don't know, it could release a demon, or it could release something different if every little thing.
You know what you do when that happens?
Run.
You call Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Or you break out the asafoetida, which is a really foul-smelling herb, and you burn some, and that gets rid of anything. That will discharge all the negative energies like Limburger cheese does.
Oh my gosh, my dog's toots will do that. Oh, they are so
that
bad.
I think is a little too much information for me today.
It was bad.
Anyway, yeah. So anyway, Wicca. How did we get here? I washed up in Washington State. I moved in with this woman, and she was a witch. She had been trained in a feminist coven down in Redlands, California, where she went to college, University of Redlands or something like that. And there are about as many different flavors of Wicca. You see, we're used to thinking of religion as confining your behavior. Religions pretty much tell you what you shouldn't do. Yeah. You shouldn't kill unnecessarily. Of course, if you kill in God's name, that's okay. You shouldn't be unfaithful to your wife, although, there are many instances of unfaithfulness in the Bible, or your husband. Blah, 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 the 10 Commandments. And every religion has something similar in it. Wicca doesn't. Yeah. Various priests or priestesses may make up books of commands, but they're only regarded as orthodox in their own circle. And it is rather a free-form religion. Now, there are some parts of it, they're very realistic, very ritualistic, and very tightly defined and controlled. They verge on what's known as ceremonial magic, which is something a little different. Wicca is done essentially for celebratory purposes. The high holy days in Wicca, starting at the beginning of the year, are, let's see, Yule is one name for it. Oh, fuck, it's Groundhog's Day, but I can't remember the term for it. Yeah, it's February 2nd. Then there's the spring equinox, May Day, the summer solstice, August 2nd, which is Lunisod or Lammas, when you celebrate the first harvest, fall equinox, Halloween, and back to the winter solstice again. So you go around in a circle. And that's referred to as the wheel of the year.
Okay.
Wheel in the sky keeps on turning, blah, 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 you know, that song.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh. What we think that comes from, okay, because think about it. A gatherer culture would celebrate what are called the cross-quarter days. Lunisod, Halloween, I can't remember its name, and May Day. Those are days that are important for agriculture, a settled kind of civilization and economy, the beginning of civilization. The cross-quarter days are more symbolic of the hunter culture, because in the winter, the goddess loses her power and the god reigns supreme, or has the most influence, I should say. He doesn't reign supreme. But you see, Wicca is also a religion that is polytheistic, that is pantheistic, and that is feminist. There are a god and a goddess in Wicca, just the same way as there are male and female in life and, you know, virtually all life that we know of. There aren't that many hermaphrodites out there. And probably with good reason, too, you know. I mean, go fuck yourself is a real saying to a cease. Yeah, anyway.
Oh, my goodness. That was a good one.
Thanks. To a sea slug, I said, because you were laughing over it. So, you know, animals like to fucking be fucked. And that's one of the reasons why we have sex here. The other reason, I guess, is it lessens the odds of parasitic invasions, because you're mixing the chromosomes every time. Instead of having one organism, you know, continually recreating itself, that would leave you vulnerable to the first disease or parasite that comes along. If you throw a different, you know, a different bunch of chromosomes into the mix. That's why we have sexual reproduction and why we have two sexes, because 2 is the minimum number you need for, you know, to mix it up. There is this, though. To my knowledge, there is no scholarship that shows any connection between the witchcraft of the Middle Ages, which was a mass form of insanity on the part of a lot of white men against their own women. Any connection between that and anything which may have developed in England in the 1940s or 50s. Because in 1951, a man named Gerald Gardner published a book. You see, there had been there was a law against witchcraft in England dealing from Elizabethan times.
Okay.
Elizabeth was considered a fairly enlightened monarch because she didn't burn witches. I don't know what she did with them. Maybe she hung them, but, you know, it's better than burning.
Burning, yeah.
And this law had been, it had been invoked during World War II because a trance medium, said she had made contact with a sailor who was channeling to her what really happened to a boat that had gotten, messed up by the German Navy. And the British Navy was trying to write it off. And this woman allegedly challenged the sailor and spilled the beans on this incident. It became a government incident. And the government was going to prosecute her under this witchcraft law. It was 400 years old. Well, somebody put their foot down, and I don't think the prosecution ever went forward. But after that, Gerald Gardner published this book, High Magic's Aid, which is a novel, probably not written by Gardner so much. He was an illiterate. It was probably written by the high priestess of his coven, whose name was, oh gosh. Oh,
that's a weird name. Oh gosh.
No. Yeah. I may have to look this up in a minute, but his high priestess was a much more literate woman than he was, and probably wrote it for him. He published a book, a second book, called Witchcraft Today, and that blew the lid off everything. Suddenly, all these other witches began coming out of the closet now that it was no longer to be so, and saying, "Oh, Gerald, he's just a newcomer. My tradition goes back to 1736." Or whatever.
You have good accents, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah, it's growing up around my mom, and listening to Monty Python. But they don't give you any proof, and they say, "Well, if we gave you the proof, then we wouldn't be able to tell when people come to us and say that they're of our tradition. We wouldn't be able to tell whether they were really of our tradition or whether they just gotten it from you." So that's their excuse. So you find witchcraft getting to be a real thing in late 50s and early 60s. Gets picked up by some television. There are books on the market. Diary of a Witch. I Was a Witch for the FBI. Witchcraft, communism, hypnotism, and the Beatles. I don't know. All kinds of things. And with the coming of the Flower Children, it began to get popular because this is a religion where you basically make it yourself. Nobody is going to tell you that you've done it wrong. You can start out with the Greco-Roman gods, Zeus, Jupiter, the two are the same, Mercury, Athena, my personal goddess, because she was the goddess of wisdom, and also the goddess of defensive combat. And I've always been a very defensive person.
I don't blame you. Well
defended, yeah. Or you can go with the Egyptian pantheon, Horus, Isis, Thoth, Set. Your gods can be the ancient Celtic gods, Ceridwen, Cernunnos, the sea god. Oh, what was his name? I forget. Some people even... I want to distinguish something here. Okay. There is witchcraft and there is witchcraft. Obviously, we're not using the word the same way an anthropologist is going to use it. An anthropologist is going to use it to refer to magic or a practitioner of magic that does not have social value. Bad magic, evil magic, black magic. Although I will say, in deference to the soul brothers and sisters out there, I resent that name. So witchcraft doesn't see itself as being bad magic. Witchcraft sees itself as a religion, and the religion is about this duality that that characterizes the world we live in, the duality between male and female, between living and dying, between, giving and taking, between life and death. these are parts of life that we try to ignore in our modern culture very much, you know? In tribal societies, you can't ignore them. They're in your face, you know? You don't know whether the men are going to come home from the hunt with game or with one of them injured or even dead. You don't know when you go out to the hunt that some rival tribe isn't going to raid, you know, your stockpiles and rape your women. So witches were never very well liked in the ancient world either. You find the Roman male writers writing about them and saying this. In fact, there's one whole book, I think, by Asclepius or something, the Golden Ass, where this guy is turned into an ass, a donkey, by a witch, and narrates the rest of the book from that position, observing, you know, human foibles on four hooves now. Circe was a witch, supposedly, a woman of great power, greatly respected and feared. The goddess of witches, not surprisingly, was Hecate, who was one of the original Titans, which Zeus overthrew. But he couldn't overthrow Hecate. So Hecate owns a piece of everything in heavens and on earth, supposedly. Then you come upon the Dark Ages, right after the fall of Rome. And this around maybe 1300 is when the witchcraft craze really gets started. And it comes to full flower in 14 something, when a couple of Franciscan monks published the Malleus Maleficarum. This is a book about how witches do evil magic, like stealing men's penises and hiding them in birds' nests and trees to make the poor guys. Yeah.
We like to do that still.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know,
I mean,
all women are witches. They're all suspect of witchcraft. No, seriously. This was mass insanity on the part of Christian Europe. And in Germany, all of the women in County Trier were killed, except for one old woman. Can you imagine that? A whole county. I don't know what the population of the county was in, 1480 or whatever, but in Spain, when they were digging in the early 20th century for a new subway system, they found a layer of ash 6 feet thick, which they thought was from a volcanic eruption. No, that was the ashes of the people who were burned in the Grand Plaza.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Oh, that's a lot of people.
Yes. And of course, they weren't just after witches. That was the Spanish Inquisition. They went after everybody, apostates, infidels, sorcerers. Also, let's talk about something else. There's the word warlock, which comes up. It's, if you ever watch, or what's that stupid 1960s TV show? Bewitched. Yes.
Oh yeah. I like that show.
It's for laughs. 1960s laughs. A warlock. Supposedly a warlock is a male witch, but male witches don't use that word. A male witch is a witch. A female witch is a witch. A warlock, I'm told the etymology of this word is word lack.
Word lack?
Word lack. Your word is lacking. In other words, you are not telling the truth. Now, how did male witches get tagged with this? Well, if you go back and you read some of the accounts, it's the female witches who were tortured. The male witches could buy their way out of it by turning in the women. And they were given dispensation by the church. So a whole bunch of covens must have been turned over by the men in them. You see, and there is a horrible, terrifying letter, which I quote in a a video. I will send you a link to a video I made about witchcraft.
Okay.
A half-hour video. It's a letter from a man who was jailed because of witchcraft. He was accused of witchcraft. His name was Johannes Junius. This letter was smuggled out of prison, and it was written under torture. He says, once the inquisitors get a hold of you, they never let go, be you ever so good. And they torture you until you confess and until you name others. And then they let you die. So that was the church's operational mode of doing business. Is it, and when you look at the victims of witchcraft, these were like old women. They were women who had inherited wealth and gotten some money, gotten a little bit ahead, because you see, that was all forfeit to the church when they were accused of witchcraft. Z. Budapest, a modern day witch who lives in Los Angeles, I don't know if she's still alive, she'd be quite old, but she says an ancestor of hers was accused of witchcraft because a bale of hay fell off a wagon.
So they just look for anything.
Yes, they didn't need an excuse. I mean, regimes that operate by terror don't need an excuse. The terror is a reason itself. This was just like the McCarthy era. There's a reason why, and Donald Trump keeps saying, oh, the persecution of men is a witch hunt. Well, he doesn't know what a witch hunt is. A really good film about this is The Conqueror Worm with Vincent Price.
Let me write that down.
Yeah. It's one of the films he made back in the 60s or maybe the early 70s. And it portrays a somewhat fictionalized account of this English witch hunter. God, he was real famous in his time. I'm having a series of brain farts tonight.
Well, that's like my whole life.
Anyhow, wasn't Guy Fawkes? No. Anyway, the letter of Johannes Junius is terrifying and accurate and truthful, and I recommend that anybody who wants to know what was going on during what witches call the burning times read that and study it, because it was mass insanity on the part of European men against women. And any woman with any power, any control over a man, any wealth, any land was at risk. There's a couple of beautiful films about it. One, a Norse film called Witch Hunt by Jan Trier, I think. It's subtitled, but it's about a woman who falls victim to the church.
Okay.
So I think Gerald Gardner was starting from whole cloth. And I think what Gerald really wanted to do, because he started founding covens in England in the 1940s, when England was in danger of invasion from Hitler's army. And I think what he really wanted was a secret underground network that would do sabotage and convey information. And Gerald Gardner was an interesting character. He grew up in the Solomon Islands, in Dutch culture, where there were powerful shaman, tribal people. That condition was still very much alive there. And he was raised alongside this, and apparently saw things and learned things that convinced him that you can influence things with the right spell or by your mind. And that led to witchcraft coming to America, which it did in the 1970s. There was a guy, Alex Sanders, one of Gerald Gardner's students, who proclaimed himself king of the witches back then. I don't know who elected him. or, you know, who gave him the title, but
he may have done it himself.
yeah, more than likely. There is no king of the witches. You know, witchcraft is trying to organize witches is a lot like herding cats. Because, okay, at one end, you have these very traditional people, the Gardnerians, you know, and the other old English traditions who have very elaborate rituals where you kiss your dagger a bunch of times and, you know, make pentacles in the air and say the right words and invoke the four quarters. And yes, if you fuck something up with that, you know, nothing evil is going to happen, but, you know, you might not have the best circle that night. I mean, you have to really work at it to bring, you know, evil stuff out. It doesn't happen while you're playing with a Ouija board someday.
There's stories, though.
Oh, God, yeah. Well, there are urban myths about the lady who put her poodle in the microwave oven to dry it, too. They're just as true. And at the other end, you have what's called kitchen witching.
Kitchen witching?
Kitchen witching. These are the people. This is like self-made witchcraft, you know? There's a wonderful film about this, too, which is called, oh, God, everything's failing me tonight. In this film, a witch makes a spell by spitting in a shoe and throwing it out a window.
Huh.
And it hits somebody on the head. And that somebody does something that leads to a chain of very improbable events. But they lead to the spell having the right consequences. And that's kitchen witching. And it's very informal, you know. Some people don't even carry out, you know, the full moon and the new moon and all that stuff. In that respect, it becomes like folk magic, which runs in some families. There are some families that claim to have the ability.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with these people who say that, oh, we all have psychic abilities. You know, we can all channel, or, you know, we all have telepathy, or we can all do anything psychic. I think like everything else, like our eyes or our skins, it's genetic. And some people are going to have better skills, and some people are going to have worse ones. And to this date, you know, we don't understand it. We don't understand. Well, science is maybe just beginning to accept that, you know, some things like telepathy might exist. And I have very severe limits on what I choose to believe, too. I'm not sure I believe in a soul. I certainly don't believe in God. I gave that up when I left Wicca, as I will get around to explaining. And I don't believe in a lot of the New Age fallacies, you know. I don't believe in the Philadelphia experiment. I don't believe in Hans Halser, the psychic photographer. I've seen too many of his photos that I could explain. I don't believe in that German ancient astronauts guy. I mean, the New Age is largely just the recycled Victorian spirituality of the late 19th century. The Fox sisters, you know, oh, what was her name? God, I should have studied up for this test. That lady that studied in Tibet, Madam, oh God, no, I forget.
I wouldn't even be able to help you. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. It's recycled 19th century mysticism given a new varnish. And it doesn't appeal to me. I believe in a few things, okay? I believe I've had telepathic experiences. That's happened to me several times, most prominently with the dolphin.
Mm-hmm.
So I obviously believe that telepathy is possible. And I do believe in UFOs because they've been cited and, you know, verified by alternative means too often.
Yeah.
I mean, the Navy is just, you know, analyzing 144 of them, couldn't come up with any explanation for 143.
Mm-hmm.
Says, we need more study. Well, you know what? They needed more study back in 1947. Anyway, so you have this whole range of and in witchcraft is only one part of the pagan spectrum. The pagan spectrum includes people doing Norse rituals, and there is in some of those, I don't want to by all means tar all Norse ritualists with the same brush, but in some of those, there's a very distinct whites only message that only people of Nordic heritage should be able to worship the Norse gods. Well, I have white friends who are worshiping the black gods, the Yoruba gods, which feature in voodoo and the region,
yeah.
the New Orleans region.
Mm-hmm.
I think you should feel free to worship wherever you feel called to worship God. Now, I was living with this young lady, Leslie, and she was telling me about witchcraft, and I, was surprised. I was surprised to learn that witchcraft isn't Satanism, has nothing to do with Satan. Satan's a Christian problem. It doesn't have anything to do with witchcraft. Yeah, we've got a god with antlers, but that's Kernenos. That's, the horned god. He is the god of the hunt, and the hunt was very important in old times. And she told me one thing. She said, all acts of love and pleasure are rituals to the gods. And I had finally found a religion that did not condemn my relationship with Dolly the dolphin. Right then, I knew I was supposed to be a witch. And I said, teach me. And she started teaching me. She had her limitations, but we did some very remarkable things in the Seattle area. We brought Zip Budapest up from LA. See, we formed a coven, basically just the two of us. And we published a journal, which was the first pagan journal published in the Northwest in Seattle. There was a very lively and well-organized Wiccan community when I started learning there. And I watched it fall apart because of internal bickering, holier than thou, just the usual things that break up groups of people that aren't well managed.
Yeah.
And saw the whole thing fall into degeneracy. My wife and I also arranged with another couple to give an exclusive interview to the Seattle Times, which was a front page story, and got its own write-up with several extra, sidebars in the people section. We did it under our magical names. And even though we didn't, see, there's only two things about the craft you can't tell. Nobody cares if you tell about the rituals. That stuff is just the trappings. Who be of the craft, and where the rites be held? Those are the two secrets. And if you want to come out as a witch, that's perfectly okay. But don't out anybody else.
Don't out anybody else.
Right. Some witches are like really paranoid about this. And we found out who when that article hit the paper.
Really?
We got slammed by these other witches for merely saying that some witches lived in the Greenwood district, which comprises, one of the districts of Seattle. I don't know, there's 16,000 people in it or something. Well, we had a couple of friends there who were witches who just flipped their wig. You've led the Inquisition to our door. What have you done? Oh, God, get over it. Other witches thought it was fine. There was a guy out at Index. Pete Pathfinder was his name, his magical name. His real name was Reverend Pete Davis. And yes, he was a reverend in the Universal Church. He'd been mayor of a small New Jersey town. He set up this wonderful stone circle out there. It was like a miniature Stonehenge. Oh. And this was in a town up in the Cascades. It was already cool and foggy and rainy. And it would be very nice to go up there and hold various seasonal rituals. And I did that several times. We used things like public parks. We'd go there. And it's always a problem, too, trying to coordinate your rituals with the general public work calendar. Because, you know, Halloween is not a high holy day to most people.
No.
No. To witches, Halloween is the day on which the veil between the worlds gets very thin. And spirits from the other world can come over to this one, which means mainly is that you're dealing with your ancestors, okay? And if you haven't been giving your ancestors the right devotions and, you know, praising them, and they may not look favorably upon you. On the other hand, if you know, you remember them fondly and well, they might smooth out your path a little bit. But the thing about witchcraft is, here's the whole thing. And this is basically what I realized. I left my first wife because basically she didn't want to live with me anymore. And 3 years later, we got divorced, and I married my second wife, who was also a witch. This was the really weird part. I found a witch in Seattle. That's not so odd. But finding a witch in Farmington, New Mexico, that requires magic, honey.
Like, so like it wasn't even like through anyone you knew that was into it. It was just, she just happened to be randomly.
No, not randomly. See, there is one mainstream religion that recognizes witchcraft, and that is Unitarian Universalism. And I don't even know if you want to call that a mainstream religion. I've always had big disappointments in Unitarian churches because they talk that liberal talk, but when it comes to action, it's hard to get them to walk the walk. But in this one, I met this woman. She was looking for cover there, you see. Farmington is really a very small town, and she was a teacher, and she was known. So it behooved her to do something religious, even if most people didn't understand it. Unitarian Universalism is a rather obscure but very simple doctrine. I mean, you know, Unitarians believe that God isn't three, he's one, and Universalists believe that nobody is beyond redemption. So there you go. But witches like to hide out there because they do recognize a Wiccan church, and they have a Wiccan section, you know, like they have a Buddhist section and a Christian section. They're all Unitarian. Okay. What happens when you make a spell? When you are thinking about making a spell, your mind is already thinking about the conditions that will satisfy the spell, what you're making the spell about, what you need to do or change or have happen. Okay. So you are, without realizing it, imagining those conditions when you make the spell. And in effect, after you've done making the spell, you go about looking for something to fill that spell-shaped hole. You're looking for an answer in magical terms. And this process is never repeatable. I don't care what people say. I've had people say, you know, I made $1 million with the spell that I repeated. And I said, where's the $1 million? Oh, I don't have it. It's in the bank, you know. Spells are not repeatable. They're not science experiments. Every spell is unique unto itself. And for that reason, and the fact that we are looking for something to fulfill the spell, spells don't work as advertised. You may find what you want, but only because you didn't stop looking for it.
Yeah, you find any way to turn something into what you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was a whole book called Persuasions of the Witch's Craft that I read, which was done by a sociologist in England. And she said she came to actually believe in witchcraft herself for a while, but that she finally reasoned it out. And and I feel, not to put down witches. I feel the same way about a prayer or a supplication of any deity.
Mm-hmm.
They're all equally valid, and they're all equally false. There is no one running this universe except Mother Nature, and she's a mean bitch. Yeah.
For sure.
As the famous biologist Edmund O. Wilson said, Mother Nature bats last, and she owns the ballpark. So I had this realization very suddenly. See, I had done a spell for money again. I had done it differently this time. I had invoked a Hindu deity, Ganesh, the elephant-headed god who is the overcomer of obstacles. Because even though my second wife and I were both making good incomes, we were both working, her as a teacher, me as a reporter. We had 3 kids, 2 of hers and 1 of mine, living with us. And we bought a house, and we were having to make modifications to it for the kids. And it was expensive, we were pulling in a little over $50,000 a year, and that wasn't quite enough for a couple with 3 kids to live on in the mid-1990s. So I did this ritual, and I got a phone call directed to me at work. Now, this is a phone call looking for a photograph, and then normally it would have gone to the photographer, but he was out of the office that day, so I took the call. And the call was from somebody at Time magazine, and they had read about a Navajo uranium mining protester, and they wanted pictures of him. So I got the assignment from Time to take the pictures.
Okay.
And that's the only photo I've ever gotten in Time. I wish I had it here. Well, hang on.
Okay.
We'll have to edit this out of the finished program. I can't find it.
Oh, man.
I ran it as it's a very good picture of the guy. He's leaning against the fence with a water tower in the background. He was protesting uranium mining in Navajo country because they had the best water on the reservation in his chapter, and he didn't want to see it polluted. Anyway, well, I did the spell. I got this job. I got $400 for the photo. And then I realized it wasn't repeatable. If it wasn't repeatable, then how could I prove a connection between the two things? Any connection, I must have put there myself. I must have thought it up myself. There's really no, let's face it, when you really grow up, you stop believing in magic. At least you stop believing in that kind of magic.
Yeah.
I still believe it's magic that, a life is conceived in a woman's body. I believe it's magic when the trees flower in the spring. You can feel that kind of magic. You can feel it in your body. And maybe that's what Reich was talking about, to go full circle on this. But so I lost my faith in Wicca. I lost my faith, and I became a total atheist. I'm still a pagan in some ways. My attitudes and beliefs are still very pagan. But I went to a couple of rituals after that, and it just sounded like a bunch of gibberish. Like people chanting nonsense. Silly. It didn't work for me anymore. And it's too bad, because I had some very good times at the big pagan rituals I went to with my family. It's perfectly safe events for children to be at, More people around there have swords. Anybody who intruded in that place and wasn't known to the organizers would be held at sword point until the police could get there.
Oh, that would be, I would want to hold a sword.
Well, my dear. And the nonsense about witches riding broomsticks too. That may have. Well, we do use a broom to sweep the circle with, to clear away negative energies, or I did. But also, riding the broomstick there are some recipes that have come down to us from the Middle Ages for these flying ointments. This is how the witches attended Black Mass, according to the church.
Oh.
They rubbed the salve on their bodies, and the salve contained damiana, marijuana, several other potent herbs. And a guy who, a German chemist, I think, tried one of these out in modern times and said, it was real effective. I thought I went to a Black Mass with the devil. Yeah. And women may have applied this by putting it on a broomstick and then putting the broomstick between their legs, where, of course, you have very soft absorptive membranes. And that's how they got it into their system.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, yes, possibly. Very, very possibly.
Mm-hmm. People still jump the broom at weddings, There's a lot of folk traditions around, just like the Christian church built its churches on the ruined temples of the pagan faiths.
Oh,
the pagan faiths are now building their religions on the crumbling temple of the Christian faith. And it is. The Christian faith is crumbling fast in this country. I'm glad for it. I think the more people wake up and realize that, you are not God's puppy dog anymore, the better off we'll be as a society. The more people that can face. I mean, even as a little kid, I was aware that the world was going to end someday. I was aware that I was going to die. It frightened me terribly. And witchcraft did teach me one thing. Let me wrap up with this, because it's about 10 o'clock. Witchcraft teaches you that your dark side is a repository for all the pain and fear and unfulfilled longings and heartbreak and bitter, nasty things that have happened to you in your life. And when you face up to it, you can turn it around, and you can make it a source of personal power by overcoming these things, by overcoming these hurts, by using that knowledge to make you a better, more compassionate person with a feeling for others. And that, I think, is the most significant thing I learned from 20 years of practicing Wicca. It wasn't how to chant a spell or set up a magical circle. It was how to relate to my own pain, my own hurt.
I like that.
And turn it into something, a strength, not a weakness.
I like that. I'm sure that really did help you with everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is a rather rambling path through my past with Wicca.
Very interesting. I don't know anything about it, so thank you for telling me some things about it.
Well, one more thing. The word Wicca is derived from the same root as wicker.
Like the wicker furniture, wicker?
Yes. It means to bend and shape.
Oh.
As Z Budapest says, when the strong wind comes, you bend. Instead of breaking, you bend.
Okay, so you need to make Malcom Brenner's book of useless information, because you have a whole bunch of it.
It'll be a bestseller, I'm sure.
I would buy it.
10 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list.
It would.
Yeah. Well, I've been selling Wet Goddess now, and I'm all ready to become I've been selling Wet Goddess for 10 years now, and I'm all ready to become an overnight sensation.
Well, you know what? Maybe tonight's the night.
I don't know. I'm working with this French crew too. We went through a horrible time. The first proposal they sent me was just wrong about a number of things that were easily verifiable, in my history and the history with the dolphin.
Yeah.
And apparently they didn't want to interview me because they were saving that for the camera. So they just presumed some stuff about me and wrote it down, and I had a horrible shit fit, and the producer quit. But I'm still with the two French people that want to make this film. They're looking for a new producer. And they did finally turn out a much more accurate proposal, four-part documentary series about my experience with dolphins and other people, having similar experiences in different places. So we'll see. They hope to be here to film sometime in the fall. So we'll
Okay,
see.
Gus. Yeah. I hope it goes well for you.
I hope your show goes well, and I hope you're building an audience.
As you
Hello?
see, we've had a maximum of 6 people viewing at once.
Really? None of my friends. That's any of my friends do. A lot of them said they were going to look at it after you archived it.
Yeah, that's usually what I like to tell myself, is that most people will watch it later.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I will say this is the first time I've ever been on the same show twice.
Well, you can come on it a third time.
Great.
If you want to talk about the Navajo Nation, Navajo, whatever.
I'd love to. That's a whole another aspect of things.
Mm-hmm. So I enjoyed talking to you. You're very interesting. And thank you for talking to me.
You're welcome. And I'm full of useless information.
Yes.
Anytime you need some, feel free to ask.
Okay. All right. Well, good luck with everything. I'll talk to you later.
Good night, and thanks again. So long.
Good night. Bye.